Imagine a massive industrial construction project, the kind of colossal undertaking that literally reshapes local economies, completely dominates skylines, and permanently alters global trade routes.
Right.
Now, realize that the United States hasn't even attempted to build one of these specific facilities, like from scratch, since Gerald Ford was in the Oval Office.
Yeah, 1976.
Exactly, 1976. And to put that in perspective for you, 1976 is the year Apple was founded in a garage.
Wow.
Yeah, that is the last time someone poured a foundation for a brand new, ground-up oil refinery in America.
It's a complete half century of zero new construction in one of the most, fundamentally critical sectors of the modern global economy.
Right.
It is honestly an astonishing gap in our industrial history.
It really is. So our mission today on this deep dive is to analyze a massive stack of freshly released market intelligence reports, industry announcements, and some pretty heavy economic data to unpack a truly historic milestone.
Which is finally happening.
Yes. In Q2 of 2026, a company called America First Refining is officially breaking ground on a brand new oil refinery at the Port of Brownsville, Texas.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out why the industry spent 5 decades actively avoiding building these things, and why, of all moments in history, they are suddenly, pouring billions of dollars into starting again right now.
Because the timeline is the real puzzle here. I mean, 50 years is not just a temporary pause, right? It's a structural blockade.
Totally.
So to understand why this 2026 groundbreaking is so monumental, we first have to really understand the invisible walls that kept the industry completely paralyzed for half a century.
Okay, let's unpack this, because right out of the gate, I have to push back on the standard narrative here.
Sure.
The prevailing idea is always that, the paperwork just got too hard.
Right, the red tape.
Exactly. But we are an incredibly energy-hungry, aggressively capitalist nation. If the U.S. consumes this much oil, and there are, literal billions of dollars to be made in refining it, you cannot tell me energy companies just sat on their hands for 50 years because environmental permits were annoying.
Yeah, that doesn't track.
Right. These are corporations with literal armies of lawyers.
Yeah.
Bottomless lobbying budgets.
Yeah.
So what was the actual physical barrier keeping shovels out of the ground?
Well, it wasn't just the existence of the paperwork, it was the compounding financial risk attached to that timeline.
Okay.
When you're talking about a greenfield refinery, meaning a brand new site built on just an empty dirt lot, the environmental permitting alone drags on for anywhere from 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years, just for the permits.
Just the permits. So you're sinking hundreds of millions of dollars into environmental impact studies, legal battles, local zoning hearings, and you have absolutely zero guarantee that the project will ever actually be approved.
Wow. So it's not just the cost of paying the lawyers, it's the fact that you are freezing billions of dollars in capital for a decade on what is basically a coin toss.
Precisely. And that's before you buy a single piece of steel.
Right.
The massive multi-billion-dollar capital requirements just to build the physical infrastructure, it makes the margins incredibly tight in those early years.
I'll bet.
So because of that catastrophic upfront risk, energy companies opted for a strategy that just seemed much safer at the time. They essentially grandfathered themselves in.
Meaning they just expanded the old stuff.
Exactly. They just expanded and modified their existing legacy refineries. They would bolt on a new catalytic cracker here, expand a pipeline over there, and just slowly increase the capacity of sites that were actually built in the 1950s and 60s.
It's like constantly remodeling a 50-year-old house instead of just buying a new one, because the modern zoning laws for a new build are an absolute nightmare.
That's a great way to put it.
You just keep adding weird, expensive extensions to the kitchen.
Yeah, and that strategy worked reasonably well, actually, until it violently collided with a fundamental change in the global energy landscape.
Oh, right.
What's fascinating here is that this endless remodeling strategy was completely upended by the American shale revolution.
Because the oil itself changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of decades, the U.S. started utilizing new hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling technologies. Suddenly, America was pulling up a massive, completely unprecedented surplus of domestic crude oil.
And this is the critical mechanical catch, right? It was light, sweet crude.
Exactly. Light, sweet crude. And those old, heavily remodeled legacy refineries, they were meticulously engineered to process heavy, sour crude, which we mostly imported back then from places like the Middle East or Venezuela.
Because they literally had the wrong equipment.
Right. You can't just take light, thin shale oil and dump it into a refinery built for heavy, thick sludge. Heavy crude requires massive coking units utilizing intense heat and pressure to forcefully break down complex hydrocarbons.
And the light oil doesn't need that.
No, light shale oil is already thin. If you run it through equipment designed to boil heavy sludge, the massive heaters essentially overcook it. The distillation columns literally flood with too much vapor. It's dangerous, it damages the equipment, and it's wildly inefficient.
So to help you visualize this at home, it's essentially like owning a massive, highly productive coffee farm, but your kitchen is only equipped with a tiny tea strainer.
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Like you have an abundance of the raw material, but your machinery is completely wrong to process it. You just make a mess.
It's a total structural mismatch. You have the resource, but you lack the mechanism to refine it safely and profitably. And the consequences of this mechanical mismatch have been quietly devastating for the U.S. economy.
Let's look at the hard data from our sources on that. Because between 2014 and 2024, because we physically could not refine our own light shale oil, the United States had to export 10 billion barrels of crude oil.
Which is crazy on its own.
But wait, it gets worse. Because our economy still desperately needed refined products like gasoline and jet fuel, we simultaneously imported 28 billion barrels of different oil and refined fuels from overseas.
It's just the inefficiency is staggering.
We are shipping our own perfectly good oil across the ocean just to buy different oil from other countries and ship it all the way back, simply because we don't have the right machinery calibrated at home.
Exactly. And that continuous forced loop of exporting our own resources while importing someone else's, that represents a shocking $1.8 trillion cost to American consumers and workers over that 10-year period.
1.8 trillion with a T.
Yeah, it is a massive bleeding wound in the domestic economy.
That perfectly contextualizes the quote in these reports from Trey Griggs, the president of America First Refining.
Oh yeah, read that quote.
He summarized the entire crisis by saying, "The United States has a surplus of light shale oil, but a shortage of refining capacity designed to process it."
It's such a simple, understated sentence.
But it represents a multi-trillion-dollar leak. And that leak is exactly why the 50-year drought is finally breaking. The financial pain of losing $1.8 trillion finally eclipsed the regulatory pain of building a new facility.
Precisely. The sheer scale of the lost capital forced the industry's hand.
Right.
The financial incentive to finally build a purpose-built facility, one chemically engineered from day one to handle American light sweet crude, it just became way too large to ignore.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the actual blueprint America First Refining put together to solve this, because they're targeting the Port of Brownsville, Texas.
Yep.
And looking at the zoning maps in our notes, this isn't just a random plot of coastal land. It is located in a federally designated economic opportunity zone.
Which is absolutely huge. For a project of this magnitude, that designation is the linchpin.
How so?
Well, operating inside an economic opportunity zone offers massive structural tax incentives that dramatically de-risk those early stages we were talking about.
Right, the dangerous capital-intensive years.
Exactly. It legally shields specific investments from capital gains taxes if they're held long-term. And that allows the developers to attract billions in private equity that might otherwise be way too skittish to endure a 10-year build-out. It offsets those staggering upfront costs.
And for those of you listening, we really need to clarify. This isn't some speculative, maybe someday in the future whiteboard concept. This is actively happening.
Yeah, the financial validation on the Brownsville project is completely locked in. The developers secured a binding 20-year offtake agreement back in February of 2026.
And an offtake agreement is basically a guaranteed buyer, right?
Exactly. It's a legally binding contract from a buyer who commits to purchasing the refined products for the next 2 decades.
Wow.
So the revenue stream is legally secured before a single yard of concrete is even poured. And on top of that, the project is backed by a 9-figure equity investment from a global supermajor oil company.
And just to add context for you guys, a supermajor isn't like a regional Texas startup.
Yeah.
We're talking about one of the top 5 globally dominant multinational oil conglomerates.
Right.
When an entity of that size is pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into a greenfield site, they have stress tested the economics to the absolute breaking point.
Oh, they have run every possible projection. And the projected physical output here is just massive.
Let's hear the numbers.
Once this facility comes online, it is engineered to redirect 60 million barrels of U.S. crude annually.
60 million.
Every single year. That's 60 million barrels that used to be loaded onto international tankers and exported, which will now stay domestically housed for refining.
If you extrapolate that over the 20-year life of the offtake agreement, the scale becomes almost hard to comprehend. They're going to process 1.2 billion barrels of oil.
Yeah.
The raw material alone is worth about $125 billion. And at the other side, they're going to produce 50 billion gallons of refined products like high-grade gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel.
Which is worth an estimated $175 billion.
The value creation is enormous. But the ripple effect on the broader economy is what truly matters here, I think.
Without a doubt. Wait, because if we are keeping 60 million barrels a year here instead of exporting it, and we are refining it locally instead of importing the finished fuel, we aren't just saving on shipping costs, we are entirely cutting out the international middleman.
Exactly.
That has to have a massive structural impact on the national trade deficit.
A $300 billion impact, to be exact. Yeah, by synthesizing the production data against current import and export ratios, the ultimate net impact is a projected $300 billion improvement to the United States trade imbalance.
That is incredible.
Instead of paying foreign nations to process our energy, we are capturing that entire value chain locally. It's a massive wealth retention mechanism for the American economy.
So the economic math is bulletproof. The mechanical crude mismatch created the trillion-dollar opportunity, the Brownsville site offered the vital tax shields, and the 20-year agreement guaranteed the profits.
Right.
But that still leaves a massive question. Why is this breaking ground right now in Q2 of 2026? I mean, they've known about the shale mismatch for a decade. Why didn't they do this in 2018? If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look outside the United States.
Okay.
You don't authorize a multi-billion-dollar, multi-decade infrastructural mega project in a geopolitical vacuum. Look at the current global instability. The ongoing, escalating conflict in Iran is creating massive, sustained anxiety in global energy markets.
Yeah, we are seeing crude oil actively pushing past $120 a barrel right now.
Which completely changes the calculus, right? It goes from a corporate spreadsheet optimization to a direct national defense strategy.
Absolutely.
Because when geopolitical tension threatens international shipping lanes and supply chains, domestic refining ceases to be merely a lucrative economic opportunity. It instantly transforms into a critical national security priority.
Right, you can't have your military waiting on imported jet fuel.
Exactly. You must be able to fuel your own domestic economy, your military apparatus, and your logistics networks without relying on overseas actors who might be suddenly hostile to you or whose shipping lanes might be blockaded.
It's the ultimate sovereign insurance policy. And scanning these industry reports, it's pretty clear this refinery isn't an isolated event.
Not at all.
The U.S. is currently in the middle of a massive, sweeping industrial construction renaissance. It's not just energy security driving this, it's the post-pandemic reshoring of manufacturing supply chains, plus this completely unprecedented, enormous data center build-out to support the AI boom.
Yeah, we are essentially attempting to rebuild the American industrial base all at once. And there are incredible legislative tailwinds forcing this simultaneous demand.
Right, all the federal money.
Exactly. You have massive federal initiatives that were passed over the last few years, aggressively hitting the execution phase right now.
Yeah.
The IIJA, the Massive Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, is funding roads, bridges, and grid upgrades.
Yep.
Then the CHIPS Act is injecting billions to build domestic semiconductor manufacturing plants. And the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is funding a wave of new energy projects.
And regardless of the politics behind any of those bills, whatever side of the aisle you're on, the functional reality on the ground is that these acts are flooding the open market with capital.
Very true.
They are driving simultaneous, aggressive industrial demand across multiple sectors at the exact same time.
The next 5 to 10 years are looking exceptionally, historically strong for heavy industrial construction. Capital is deployed, the blueprints are drawn, and the political will is aligned.
So what does this all mean for the actual execution? We have the billions in funding, we have the strategic coastal location in Texas, and we definitely have the geopolitical panic pushing it forward.
Right.
But to actually make this a reality, human beings have to physically build it. And looking at the engineering requirements in these reports, that brings us to what might be the single biggest, most terrifying hurdle of the entire operation.
Yeah, the physical constraint of the labor market. It is the one thing you cannot simply legislate or fund into existence overnight.
Right. We're talking about erecting thousands of tons of structural steel, laying miles and miles of high-pressure process piping that has to withstand intense chemical volatility.
Yep.
Pouring massive, deeply engineered concrete foundations to support those coking units. Constructing sprawling tank farms, complex cooling towers, state-of-the-art fire protection systems, environmental containment zones.
It's a staggering amount of physical labor.
It is. With all this simultaneous industrial booming, we just talked about the GPS Act factories in Arizona, the AI data centers in Virginia, the infrastructure upgrades nationwide. Who was actually left to build this mega refinery in Texas?
You've identified the critical bottleneck that could derail the entire timeline. The industrial labor market is currently in a state of outright crisis when it comes to highly skilled trades.
How bad is it?
Well, the market intelligence data we are reviewing shows a staggering 501,000 worker shortage currently constraining staffing across the construction sector nationwide.
500,000 workers short.
Yes. And the crucial thing to understand is why the shortage exists right now.
Because they are all competing for the exact same, incredibly specific, highly trained individuals.
It's exactly the same labor pool. The industrial electrician needed to wire the complex cooling tower for a massive Google AI data center. That is the exact same highly specialized electrician required to wire a high-pressure, volatile refinery pipeline.
Wow, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. The heavy equipment operators digging foundations for a semiconductor plant are the same operators needed to dig the containment zones in Brownsville. And it's exponentially worse when you zoom in on the local geography.
Because of Houston.
Exactly. The Texas Gulf Coast labor pool is already stretched incredibly thin because they have to constantly service, maintain, and upgrade the massive existing Houston petrochemical corridor.
Just to give you all an idea of who exactly is missing from the workforce, the trades in the absolute highest demand to pull off a refinery project of this magnitude include highly specialized pipe fitters and welders, industrial electricians, instrument and control technicians, structural iron workers.
Boilermakers, too.
Right. Boilermakers and industrial painters and insulators. You cannot just hire someone off the street, give them a hard hat, and tell them to weld high-pressure process piping that will carry 500-degree volatile chemicals.
Definitely not.
It takes years of rigorous apprenticeship, stringent certification, and really specialized safety training.
Which creates a deeply challenging paradox for the major construction contractors bidding on these mega projects. On one hand, winning the Brownsville refinery contract offers a massive, highly lucrative, multi-year revenue stream.
Right, it's a golden ticket.
It's the kind of historic backlog that can secure a commercial construction company's financial future for an entire decade. But the operational friction to actually execute it is immense.
They are caught between a rock and a hard place. They have a $1 billion contract, but they are fighting tooth and nail against AI companies and the federal government just to find enough certified welders to staff the site.
And while they are fighting that labor war, their daily operational overhead is just surging. To run a site like this, you need fleets of heavy equipment, massive diesel generators, and constant transport trucks moving materials.
And fuel is not cheap.
Exactly. Right now, diesel fuel is sitting at $4.60 a gallon. That sustained high overhead is actively squeezing the profit margins of these contractors. It's a macroeconomic environment of immense historic opportunity, paired with incredibly high operational friction and daily financial risk.
It's the ultimate high-wire act for the builders. You win the bid of a lifetime, you make history by building the first refinery since the 1970s. But then you have to figure out how to staff it and fuel the heavy machinery without going bankrupt in the process.
Executing a mega project in this specific, highly constrained environment requires a level of strategic planning and logistics that goes far beyond traditional construction management. You basically have to treat the labor force as the single most valuable resource on the board.
Let's take a step back and really recap the sheer scale of what we've unpacked today, because it's a massive shift in the global energy posture. America First Refining is officially breaking a 50-year drought. A half-century of waiting, bolting on old parts, and bleeding money is finally over. They are breaking ground in Brownsville, Texas, on a facility chemically engineered to process 1.2 billion barrels of domestic light shale oil over the next 20 years.
It's monumental.
It's a calculated economic maneuver designed to physically plug a $1.8 trillion leak, shift the United States trade imbalance by $300 billion, and simultaneously serve as a critical sovereign linchpin for American energy security in a deeply volatile $120 barrel global market.
It is undeniable undeniably a defining infrastructural moment for this decade. But, as we wrap up our analysis today, I want to leave you with a broader, perhaps more provocative question to consider on your own.
Lay it on us.
This massive undertaking, which requires billions of dollars of upfront capital, immense political and corporate will, and the successful navigation of a severely constrained labor market, it relies entirely on the long-term extraction and processing of fossil fuels.
Right.
And it is breaking ground during a historical era when much of the developed world is laser-focused on the green energy transition, electrification, and carbon reduction.
That's a huge contrast.
It is. So if this mega project succeeds in navigating the intense regulatory hurdles, the labor shortages, and the economic friction, does it signal a long-term, highly calculated doubling down on American fossil fuel dominance for the next half-century? Or is this new Brownsville refinery the final spectacular last hurrah of legacy industry flexing its financial muscle before the green transition fully takes over the global economy?
Wow, that is a fascinating tension to leave off on.
Yeah.
Are we looking at the grand rebirth of American refining or the ultimate multi-billion-dollar swan song?
Exactly.
It really makes you look at that Q2 2026 groundbreaking in a totally different light. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep examining the data, keep looking for the mechanical truth behind the headlines, and above all, keep questioning the world around you. We'll catch you next time.